Penn State's starting lineup and depth chart have all the makings of a college football playoff team.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's take an inside look at Penn State's starting lineups and depth chart for the 2024 college football season. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. I'd greatly appreciate it if you left a like on this episode, but more importantly, be a part of the discussion. Which players do you think will be key for Penn State this season, anywhere on the depth chart? That's the starters all the way down to who you think will be key contributors in a backup role. But by all accounts, yes, I have my concerns. The only concern I have about Penn State's depth is at linebacker, but this roster has the makings of a college football playoff team. It absolutely does. So we'll go through the starting lineups first and then go through position by position on the depth chart so that you get an all-encompassing look at Penn State. So starting with quarterback, this is the starting lineup for Penn State. Quarterback's going to be Drew Aller. He was the starter a season ago. He is back and will be the starter once again. Bo Pribula will cycle in, and why I mention him right now with the starting lineup, he is going to play more frequently than he did a season ago, and they'll have special Wildcat designs for him as that true dual threat quarterback. Then you go to running back, Nicholas Singleton or Katron Allen. Consistent for the past 2 years, right? When they were true freshmen, true sophomores, now as true juniors, they truly split reps. It is a 50-50 timeshare between the two of them. They are co-starters. Singleton or Allen will be the running backs here. They could start on any given day, but they rotate in so much that they're essentially co-starters. And then wide receiver is where it gets interesting. And wide receiver, Trey Wallace is going to be your number one wide receiver. And then Liam Clifford has stepped up a lot. And the intel and what the coaches have led us to believe is that Liam Clifford is starting to separate himself as one of the better wide receivers in the room. So that's going to be your slot receiver, your number one, your outside boundary receiver, Trey Wallace. Julian Fleming isn't a guarantee to start week in, week out. It's kind of similar to Dante Cephas, who came in last season as a transfer, and I know what happened with Dante Cephas. But Julian Fleming, different circumstances, and will contribute heavily to this Penn State offense. But Amari Evans has a case in this new look Andy Kotelnicki offense to be that third starting wide receiver when it is 11 personnel. Julian Fleming will contribute a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a listing of Julian Fleming or Amari Evans, but I think Amari Evans is going to get that first nod since he's been with the program for quite some time now. He is a veteran, and he offers that explosive over-the-top ability that Julian Fleming doesn't exactly. But Fleming is the better run blocker, graded out very well at Ohio State. That was the kind of system he was in high school as well. He blocked a lot when he played high school football, but Amari Evans does give you that explosive playability that Penn State had been lacking. On the offensive line, actually, we should go tight end, shouldn't we? We should go tight end and then offensive line. Tyler Warren is going to be your starter, was essentially a co-starter, but probably more so the backup a season ago when Theo Johnson was there. He is the true number one tight end in this case on the depth chart. And then on the offensive line, from left to right, Drew Shelton is going to be the left tackle. At left guard, Vanga Ioane. Your center is going to be Nick Dawkins. Your right guard is going to be Sal Wormley. And your right tackle, we still actually don't have word if it's going to be Anthony Donko or Nolan Rucci. So that's another instance of Penn State might have a co-starter here at that right tackle spot, Donko or Rucci. I mean, and again, that's good to see. I've said this already, that the competition, for it to be this close, is a good thing because you'd rather have more guys that are capable of playing down to down in a game of college football rather than a clear gap in this case, especially when you have so many new faces on Penn State's offensive line compared to 2023. Olu Fashanu, Hunter Norzad, Caden Wallace were all NFL type of players, but that's going to be your starting offensive line. And JB Nelson, I want to mention him, even though he's not a starter at the moment, James Franklin described him as a Swiss Army knife. He is essentially that sixth man that will play a backup role to Nick Dawkins at center, both the guard spots, either the tackle spots, because I don't think everyone's starting spot is guaranteed on the offensive line just yet. Maybe in the case of a Nick Dawkins or a Sal Wormley because they've been with the program for so long. But if there's any question marks there, JB Nelson can slide right in and take over if need be. Again, James Franklin's words, Swiss Army knife. Let's flip it over to the defense. Starting lineup on the defensive line. I'm going with Denai Dennis Sutton as that left end, Abdul Carter as that right end, and at defensive tackle, Devon J. Thomas and Zane Durant. Any of those four at the defensive tackle spot could absolutely start, but it's going to be Jay Thomas and Zane Durant. Keziah Izzard and Hakeem Beamon could absolutely be starters. I just think Devon J. Thomas and Zane Durant offer a little more there, but those guys are starting caliber. And this is with respect that Penn State is going to run a 4-2-5 defense. Your first three linebackers in a 4-3 would be Tony Rojas as your Will, Kobe King as your Mike linebacker, and then Dom DeLuca as your Sam strong side linebacker, with what is most likely going to be a 4-2-5 base defense with Tom Allen's new system because they have more safeties. Expect them to run Kobe King and Dom DeLuca to start, with Tyler Elsdon and Tony Rojas to cycle in as well. But I think Dom DeLuca and Kobe King would be the first two linebackers up if you had to pair them together. And then you move to the secondary. The secondary is going to be very interesting because there's so many new faces. Penn State loses three starters that moved on to the NFL. In Penn State's case this time around, I think your number one boundary corner is going to be A.J. Harris. A.J. Harris, you brought him in with the intention that he becomes that Joey Porter Jr. type where he can lock down a number one wide receiver or shut down one side of the field. Penn State likes to do this. For that second corner spot, they like to almost have co-starters. It was Johnny Dixon and Kalen King once upon a time, right? When Joey Porter Jr. was doing that, was the number one cornerback for Penn State. Now it's going to be a combination of Cam Miller and Jalen Kimber in this case. I think that's what it's going to be for that number two cornerback spot, and they'll rotate in pretty frequently with each other. Again, Penn State really likes to do that co-starter spot. Running back, cornerback, offensive line, it doesn't matter. Penn State really has additional starters in this case. And then that safety position gets very intriguing because of that 4-2-5 defense. And it's because they're going to have three safeties on the football field. KJ Winston is going to be that strong safety. They're the hybrid lion position, which is strong safety, additional safety, the slot cornerback / additional linebacker. That will be Jalen Reed. And then your true free safety over the top will be Zach Wheatley. The light switch is flipped on, according to James Franklin, for Zach Wheatley, and he is just too good to keep off of the football field at this point where he is in his Penn State career. So that's your starting offense and defense. Now let's go to special teams. Your punter is going to be Riley Thompson. He started a season ago, no questions there. Place kicker gets intriguing because they have a three-man competition. Oh, it was supposed to be Sanders to Haydak in that transfer from Tulsa, Chase Meyer. No, Ryan Barker made this interesting. And I would not be surprised if whoever they trot out first doesn't ultimately keep the job. The pressure is going to stay on at place kicker like it was a season ago. And when it was Alex Falcons and Sanders to Haydak. So now Sanders to Haydak, similar situation again, has to do it all over with Ryan Barker. I think it's going to be down to those two. The word from camp is that there wasn't a clear distance, but it was Sanders to Haydak, Ryan Barker, and then Chase Meyer. I think it's going to be Sanders to Haydak because he is the veteran. Barker's only a redshirt freshman, but I would not be surprised if Barker ends up being the starting place kicker as well if Sanders to Haydak cannot hold down the job. Your starting long snapper is Tyler Dzanski. He's going to be the starter once again, as he should be. Very good. And then at punt returner and kick returner, Caden Saunders is going to be your starting punt returner. Status quo again at kick returner. Penn State likes to have running backs returning kickoffs. Nicholas Singleton will be your main returner with Katron Allen as your up back. Don't be surprised if Cam Wallace and Quentin Martin rotate in as well. And then on kickoff, just for the sake of it, right? Everybody cares about kickoff. I think you'll see a rotation of guys like Gabe Wosu and Sanders Sahadak handling kickoff duties because they did that last season and they return as well. And of course, Holder. It could be a rotation as well. Riley Thompson is going to be your starting holder, but don't be surprised if they try to work in Beau Pribula, the backup quarterback, just to offer some interesting trick plays out of the special team spots. So that is your 2024 starting lineup for Penn State football. Now let's take a look at the depth chart a little further. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime has just introduced a new feature. It's called Gametime Picks, and that's going to make getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So, for example, if you look at I have Penn State versus Bowling Green pulled up right now, and Gametime has it all sorted out from you. You can see the top deals right away, the Gametime picks, and there's a super deal right now for tickets at $21 in section WHU, row 46. They also have them listed by price where you can get tickets as cheap as $10, $12. It's all sorted for you right there for the first home game at Beaver Stadium, Penn State versus Bowling Green. And Gametime is also offering an exclusive deal for Labor Day, 50% off tickets to the Diamondbacks and Dodgers. It's exclusively on Gametime. There's limited availability and supply, so you got to get your tickets while they last. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets now by downloading Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5. That's all it takes, $5. And you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. So it's that easy. It's that seamless. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. And if you look over at FanDuel.com right now, you can see the lines for Penn State, West Virginia. Oh, we are so close. There's been line movement in favor of West Virginia, but Penn State is still an 8.5-point favorite, minus 315 on the money line with a total set at 51.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I'll break up the remaining two parts of the show into offense and defense and go a little rapid fire here through the depth chart, starting with quarterback. Again, mentioned that Drew Aller's the starter. Beau Pribula is going to be his backup. And then true freshman Ethan Grunkemeyer is going to be the third string quarterback. He's had a really good summer. He's had a really good spring season, and parlaying all of that into a great training camp as well. Ethan Grunkemeyer has impressed me. I think, I don't want to see a scenario like this, but Ethan Grunkemeyer gives me a lot of confidence if he were ever to have to enter the game in a serious situation that he could at least manage the offense in his first year. Beau Pribula, as I know he's the backup quarterback, but you will see him consistently enough that you will think of him to a point where he is a starter. He's going to rotate in quite a bit with the new Wildcat type looks with Andy Kotelnicki as the offensive coordinator. Running back gets interesting because after Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, there's been competition for that number 3 running back spot. Cam Wallace is going to win the job. Jay Sider, the running backs coach, has spoken highly of him. James Franklin has alluded to that as well. Wallace has been dealing with some bumps and bruises throughout training camp, but he is going to be the number 3 back, and his development has been off the charts for somebody that was just a 3-star committed late to Penn State's program in that respective recruiting cycle. For the class of 2023, Penn State's been very impressed with him. He will be the third running back behind the two of them. Then Quentin Martin will most likely be the fourth. I think you're going to have Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, both the true freshmen, split reps as that number 4 running back, which isn't really that big of a deal, but because of the red shirt rules and everything, you can get these players experience without burning their red shirts. So you're almost going to have them, if Quentin Martin is starting to push the bar for his eligibility, you have Corey Smith come in. So this is more about development as opposed to true usage. Penn State's not going to try to push a number 4 running back into the game unless, again, it allows them development to that point. Going over to wide receiver, I mentioned the starters. Again, your first 5 that you should really anticipate when everybody's healthy is going to be Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, Julian Fleming, Liam Clifford, and Caden Saunders. Tyser Denmark, I think, is going to be a candidate to eventually burn his red shirt. I think there's an opportunity here. If there's an injury and just timeline, I think he has a lot of untapped potential as a true freshman, and there's just a lot of other unproven names on this list. So why not Tyser Denmark to actually push up through the depth chart to become one of those receivers that is consistently in the rotation? Mekhi Flowers, Tyler Johnson, Anthony Ivy have progressively, they've also impressed in training camp at points in time, but we don't hear rave reviews like we do about other players. So that's just something to keep an eye on here. Tyser Denmark is one of those players that has been creating a buzz at training camp, and I think he will be in the consistent wide receiver rotation not too far down the road. Other true freshman, Josiah Brown, he was injured for his senior high school season. He's still kind of recovering from that and getting up to speed, and Peter Gonzalez does have a significant injury as well, and he is anticipated to miss quite a bit of time. Back over to tight end. 4 tight ends could factor in for Penn State. So Tyler Warren is the clear-cut starter where it's been a timeshare, whether it was Warren and Theo Johnson, then Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren. Now this is Tyler Warren's gig, but between Andrew Rapplier, Luke Reynolds, the true freshman, Khalil Dinkins, Penn State has options where if Warren needs a breather or he's unavailable, you can turn to Khalil Dinkins, the true freshman Luke Reynolds, who has a lot of potential, and Andrew Rapplier, similar situation, and you still feel pretty comfortable with what you have at that tight end position. And that's not to say that Jerry Cross or Joey Schlaffer couldn't do the same thing. Penn State, this position group might in fact be the deepest, right next to defensive tackle when we talk about the defense itself, but when you think about it from Penn State's point of view, it's an embarrassment of riches for Ty Howell, who's running the show for the tight end position group, that any of these guys at that number 2, number 3 tight end spot, you will see similar production out of those guys behind Tyler Warren. Warren's an NFL talent right now. He could have gone into the NFL. He decided to come back to bolster his resume for the 2025 NFL draft. But the guys behind him, you put any of them in at this point in time, and you're really not going to see much of a difference out of that number 2, number 3 tight end spot. And with Andy Kotelnicki, the way that Penn State's traditionally run offense the past couple of seasons, they're going to run the football. They're going to factor in tight ends to the game plan pretty frequently. So expect those names to pop up quite a bit. Then when you look at the offensive depth chart, again, I named the starters. I talked about how JB Nelson is essentially that 6th man on the offensive line. Guys like Javen Williams have been moving around from tackle to guard, so he could factor in. Cooper Cousins was somebody that James Franklin had talked about in his latest press conference, saying that he is not on the scout team. He is going to be a part of the true active roster for Penn State and not be on the scout team offense itself. So Cooper Cousins most likely will be one of the true freshmen to eventually burn his red shirt and factor into playing time here. Chimney Ono, somebody else who's a redshirt freshman, could see some playing time if necessary, but those are the immediate names to think about when Penn State has its offensive line depth chart out there. So out of all these position groups here, tight end is obviously the one stacked with players that can come in and give you meaningful reps right out of the gate. I like what Penn State has at quarterback because remember, not too long ago, it was Sean Clifford and Taquan Roberson. And that was just a dumpster fire when Clifford got hurt, right? But now you have that security. I'm talking about a true freshman quarterback and saying, you know what? This guy can come in and manage a game if he needed to. Bo Prabula is going to get a lot of meaningful snaps as the backup, but you can utilize his talent in so many different ways. Penn State feels confident in what it has if they had to turn to Cam Wallace and if they had to play Quentin Martin or Corey Smith, even though ideally they don't want to do that for redshirt and eligibility purposes. Penn State, why I said they have a CFP caliber roster depth chart is here right in front of you with all of the players that I just named that could contribute. Wide receiver, offensive line certainly have the question marks, but those are the names and the layout of the depth chart that you need to know. Now let's flip it over to the defense and take a look at them outside of linebacker, defensive end, defensive tackle, the secondary. Those groups might even be better than what Penn State had last season. I'll tell you more about it next on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Do you want to get in shape, but are you having trouble staying motivated? Believe me, I've been there for sure. But you can make 5 Hour Energy shots part of your lifestyle and get the energy boost you need to get fit. We all know sometimes you don't want to go to the gym, and that's okay. But you can take a 5 Hour Energy shot to give you the feeling and the alertness so that you can get to the gym. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore. You can pick from watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's truly a flavor for everyone here. You can try them all because on the site, you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You choose the flavors and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get a 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is also not good on subscriptions, but again, that is code LOCKEDONCFB for 20% off your order. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. Aside from linebacker, which is the weakest link, I think, overall, in terms of depth on this team, I think there's certainly star power. I don't think Kobe King gets enough credit. I think eventually Tony Rojas will break out. I think it's going to be gradual, though. All the talent is there. The coaches say, he jumps out at you, but it is going, they've alluded to that. It's probably going to take some time. So anticipate that turning point week 5, week 6, because this is only his second year within the program. But I do want to start with the defensive line, go to the linebackers, and then finish up with the secondary there. At defensive end, I mentioned how Denai Dennis-Sutton and Abdul Carter are going to be your starting defensive ends. That's a pretty great, and that is a great dynamic duo. It's not a pretty great, it is a great dynamic duo, and one of the best in the Big Ten, one of the best in the country, I think right next to Ohio State's tandem of Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. I really think that's the 1A and 1B. You pick. I'll let the results speak for itself because it's hard to say in preseason, but all 4 of those players are high-end NFL talent. Behind them, Amin Vanover and Smith Vilbert, redshirt super seniors in the program now. All the veteran experience you could ever ask for will cycle in as the backup defensive ends. Now remember, Jameel Lyons is no longer with the team. I anticipated a larger role for him, but since he's off the team, you kind of have to look to those next players there. Zariah Fisher is still going to be out and miss time with an injury. We don't know the extent of that. Penn State anticipates him to be back at some point this season, but is that going to be week 4? Is that going to be week 8? Is that going to be at the end of the season into a college football playoff, right? Penn State, James Franklin had reiterated this again, that a season-ending injury, they don't like to say that because the season's not over until it's over. And technically, yes, Zariah Fisher, if the injury is that bad to an extent, could return week 12 or week 13 in a college football playoff. So we don't know the actual intel as far as when he will be back, just that he will be back. But to look at the other defensive ends, Mason Robinson and Joseph Mapoy have come on further for them in their redshirt freshman campaigns. And that's good to see that there's not a stark drop-off as you move down the defensive end depth chart. It would have been nice to have Jameel Lyons this season. I saw him as a future NFL draft pick. Maybe somebody that could have been selected on day 2, round 3 type of pick. He's not there, and Penn State has to adapt. I've already hyped up the interior of the defensive line, though. I think this group, because of the first 4 that they have, I said Javon J. Thomas and Zane Durant are going to be your starters, but the backups, and they will rotate in frequently. It's a timeshare on the interior defensive tackles just to keep legs fresh. Because Izzard and Hakeem Beamon are essentially just like starters. So even though they are going to be on the bench first and won't be in the starting lineup, they will play a lot of snaps. Alonzo Ford, remember him, transferred in from Old Dominion and didn't play last season because of injury. Well, now he's back and he's come on strong as well. So that's your third defensive tackle. Alonzo Ford, as a second string player, feel very confident in. Caleb Artis is now in his third year with the Penn State program. Those are your third defensive tackles. And then you have a guy like Ty Blanding as the redshirt freshman down the list. The true freshmen, DeAndre Cook, T.A. Cunningham, Liam Andrews, probably won't play at all. You'll see them in games just to get them that experience, but don't anticipate them to burn their red shirt. They have to add the weight so that they can get adjusted to expanded Big Ten play in college football overall. Now we'll go to the linebacker, address the linebacker group, and address the elephant in the room, because this is my biggest concern. There is star power here. Offensive line can be a concern too, but at least they have depth. At least they have options that if a player needs a break, needs a breather, happens to be injured, the offensive line can at least have a next man up here. I don't think Penn State can afford to lose any of its linebackers. Whether that is Kobe King, who is your number one true linebacker. He's going to be out there 99% of the time if he is available. Tony Rojas with star potential down the road. Dom DeLuca, who just got voted as a two-time captain. You lose any of those guys, you have to turn to Tamir Robinson, who there's optimism for, but he's a second-year player, like Tony Rojas, and there's still that development to be had. Tyler Elsdon at times, criticized him on this show a good bit last season. How much progress has he made as well? He's going to be a backup. Keon Wiley's already injured. I mentioned how Jameel Lyons is not with the team anymore. Kavion Keys, same thing. Not on the team. Kicked out of school along with Lyons. Even if Keys was on the team, I've mentioned this before, I still have my concerns about the linebacker depth, because after that, it's all true freshmen. Kari Jackson, Anthony Specca. Does Penn State really want to do that? Now, they did move Dakari Nelson down from safety to linebacker to help out, but that's a work in progress as it is. He's 6'3", 217 pounds. I don't think Penn State wants its linebackers to weigh 217 pounds. If ideally he needs to add at least 13 pounds, that's going to take a few weeks. So he's almost still in a developmental phase. He's almost in a red shirt kind of season with a position change. If he can add the weight quickly, that's great, but there's still the technique element of it too. Just red flags are going to go up here if Penn State, you can't afford to lose Kobe King, Tony Rojas, and Dom DeLuca especially, but even a Tamir Robinson or Tyler Elsdon, really, those are your first five. And you hope to get Keon Wiley back. He's not out for the season. There is anticipation that he will return this season, and I had high hopes for Keon Wiley myself. I was actually really looking forward to him replacing Abdul Carter when they did announce the move that he would go to defensive end. Keon Wiley, I think, was setting up nicely at that will linebacker spot in a traditional 4-3, but that's why Penn State is going to a 4-2-5 base defense, because you're lacking at linebacker, but you have a lot of depth in that secondary. So let's talk about the secondary here. Penn State's secondary was a question mark, a major one going into the offseason. But then they get reinforcements. They get A.J. Harris from Georgia. They get Jalen Kimber from Florida. Cam Miller is returning. And then Zion Tracy and other players like Elliott Washington are developing nicely. And then they got Antoine Belgrave Shorter and John Mitchell to enroll early to practice with the team through the spring football season. These are just the cornerbacks, and I didn't even mention Davian Collins progressively. You ask a player, you ask a position coach and say, hey, who has really impressed you throughout camp that isn't exactly getting a lot of playing time right now? 9 times out of 10 for the past year and some change, it has been Davian Collins. Your first 4 rotation of cornerbacks, I mentioned how it's going to be A.J. Harris and what I expect to be co-starters between Cam Miller and Jalen Kimber because of that veteran experience. But Davian Collins can see playing time just as much in a rotational role as well, even though he won't be a true starter. And then the safety spot. Penn State's going to play 3 safeties in its base defense, probably as much as it can, because KJ Winston is a future first round, no later than a second round pick. Jalen Reed, I think, is a future draft pick as well. That is your quote unquote lion who acts as that hybrid between a strong safety and a linebacker in this case. And KJ Winston's just kind of an everything, safety, linebacker, whatever you need him to be on a given play. He's just that star kind of caliber player. Hasn't missed a tackle yet in his collegiate career. But then Zach Wheatley comes in as your true free safety. So Penn State could run a lot of cover 3 with Zach Wheatley covering a lot of ground in center field, and then AJ Harris, or a combination again of a Jalen Kimber, a Cam Miller, an Davian Collins, right, cycling through the boundary. Penn State is in a really good spot with its secondary. So I'm almost kind of saving the best for last here. And what gets really interesting is now who is backing up the 3 safeties that are going to have a lot of responsibility here between Winston, Reed, and Wheatley. Dejon Lane, the true freshman. I talked about how Cooper Cousins, James Franklin had said that Cooper Cousins was going to have the green light and not be on the scout offense and be a part of the active, the main roster, if you will, throughout practices with the anticipation that you will burn your red shirt. Dejon Lane is in a very similar spot now and could be that 4th safety for Penn State. That is very impressive. Again, Penn State is already seeing development right out of the gate. The fact that they anticipate Cooper Cousins and a player like Lane to contribute early as true freshmen is very telling. Another safety, Lamont Payne, has had a really, I think that he is another player who's come on strong, certainly will continue to develop, which is why they felt confident in moving a Dakari Nelson away from safety, flipping over a Mekhi Flowers, who was formerly a safety, to wide receiver to help that position group. If they didn't have that confidence in these 5 safeties, they wouldn't have made these kinds of moves. So even though Lamont Payne isn't going to play often, he provides you necessary depth that, again, Penn State doesn't make these moves if they said, you know what, safety, the backup safeties aren't going to be able to help out Winston and Reed and Wheatley. They make these moves based on the backups truly. So Lane and Payne, wow, that rhymes there. Lane and Payne provide a lot of value for Penn State's depth chart in that safety room. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A little more of an informational one, as the starting lineups and the depth chart, I think, fully encapsulated here in this episode. Again, let me know down in the comments, be a part of the discussion, the key players that you are looking forward to the most for Penn State in this 2024 season. I'd greatly appreciate it if you left a like on this episode. And if you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen, you got to check out Locked On College Football, hosted by Spencer McLaughlin. I've been a guest on the show many times, and I know you will enjoy it as much as I do. As now college football is back. We are truly in college football season, and Spencer McLaughlin is getting you ready for all of it. Game previews, game recaps, analysis, all of the latest news broken down in Locked On College Football. And it's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day.